I first heard about the subject of the Bible as a piece of art from my mom. She was an English major at a Catholic university, and when I was in college, we were just having a discussion about the belief in the inerrancy of the Bible and the accuracy of translation and things like that. And so she was telling me about this course she took called the Bible as Literature. And just the title of this class, at the point of my life where I was actually kind of offended by it and thought it was a little blasphemy. It's like, what do you mean the Bible is truth? What do you mean the Bible is as literature? It's like there's really no other way to look at it.
It's like saying it's entertainment.
It's like, right. Okay. It was like it's, poems are open to interpretation, but the Bible is not. It is, it is true from Genesis to maps, as I quoted. It is non-fiction, absolutely. Absolutely.
And if you change a word in it, it says, in fact, that you're not living.
You're right. The bad things will happen to you if you add to.
I don't put notes in my Bible.
Right, because if you add to or take away from it, I think highlighting is okay. But beyond that, it's up for debate. So, cycle ahead, I guess, 15, 20 years, and come to view that my first impression, my fear, was not well-founded, because the Bible is art and it is truth. It is both. These things are not mutually exclusive. So we're going to venture into a piece of the Bible that is both art and truth. Most of you have probably heard the something like a title called, or a piece in the Bible called "The Suffering Servant," "The Man of Sorrows," "The Song of the Servant," something like that. And so that's what we're going to read. It seems like if you were going to look at the Bible as a piece of literature, specifically the Old Testament, which is kind of where we've been parked for a while, this is the thing to do. This is the thing to read. So what we're going to go through is the fourth Song of the Servant. It's in Isaiah. I've printed out for you guys, if everybody picked out a hand up, the NIV translation. So that while we're reading it, we're all kind of on the same page and using the same words. So Isaiah ministered during the reign of 4 different Judean kings, and his ministry began the year King Uzziah died, about 740 or 739 BC. So he was in Jerusalem. This was a guy that had access to the spheres of power. The book of Isaiah is the 4th longest in the Bible after Psalms and Genesis and Jeremiah. His book is it's a great book if you want to. It's kind of the Bible and theology like compact. Like if you wanted to just get a whole scope of everything from Genesis to Revelation, read Isaiah first. It's got a little bit of everything. It's got apocalyptic literature. It's got poems. It's got historical narrative. It's fabulous. So we're going to park in one of the poems called "The Song of the Servant," the 4th song. And this is about. Well, I'll let you decide who or what you think the piece of poetry and truth is about. Why don't we do a little bit of round robin reading, and so rather than stick someone with the entire scope, let's start with Liz, since she's so boldly wearing a name tag that faces me. I can read it. Would you start reading? And so this 4th song actually starts at the very end of Isaiah 52. I've commonly heard to it. Oh, Isaiah 53 is great. It's about you know who. But it really starts Isaiah 52 verse 13. And each verse is a few lines long. So why don't we say 3 verses a person, and we'll really stick it to this table because there's at least 2 teachers here that I know of, and so they're okay with speaking out loud.
Yeah.
All right, take it away, Liz.
See, my servant will act wisely. He will be raised and lifted up and highly exalted. Just as there were many who were appalled at him, His appearance was so disfigured beyond that of any human being, and his form marred beyond human likeness. So he will sprinkle many nations, and kings will shut their mouths because of him. For what they were not told, they will see, and what they have not heard, they will understand.
Who has believed our message, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? He grew up before him like a tendon shot in a rout out of the dry grounds. He had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him, nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by mankind, a man of suffering and familiar with pain. Like no one whom people hid their faces, he was despised, and we held him in low esteem.
Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering, yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions, and he was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed. We all, like sheep, have gone astray. Each of us has turned to our own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all.
He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shears is silent, so he did not open his mouth. By oppression and judgment he was taken away. Yet who of his generation protested? For he was cut off from the land of the living. For the transgression of my people he was punished. He was assigned a grave with the wicked, and with the rich in his death, though he had done no violence, nor was any deceit in his mouth.
Keith, will you take it over at verse 10 and just take us home?
Take us home? Oh, that's just, okay, okay. We're not in the 54, okay, thank you. Yet it was the Lord's will to crush him and cause him to suffer. And though the Lord makes his life a guilt offering, he will see his offspring and prolong his days. And the will of the Lord will prosper in his hand. After the suffering of his soul, he will see the light of life and be satisfied. By his knowledge, my righteous servant will justify many, and he will bear their iniquities. Therefore I will give him a portion among the great, and he will divide the spoils with the strong, because he poured out his life unto death, and was numbered with the transgressors. For he bore the sin of many, and made intercession for the transgressors.
Thank you. So what we have up on the screen is Chagall, the prophet Isaiah. Can anybody tell what, if you've read the book, know Isaiah's story, what part of Isaiah this is from? Got an angel there. It almost looks like he's giving the prophet Isaiah like a burp. It's probably deeper than that, but that's my first impression. What else do you guys see in this painting?
I see comforting. I don't see burping.
His face is green. Chagall uses that green color a lot.
He does. We got a lot. We have an audience in the lower left-hand corner.
Mm-hmm.
I just caught my, and then we have I'll say mother and child possibly off to the right.
Mm-hmm.
The little blue star.
The holy blue color.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
We've got another white angel up there at the top.
Mm-hmm. Anybody know what the angel's doing?
Is the angel putting in coal?
Yeah,
His lips,
yeah.
The ceiling.
So the scene, if my memory is correct, is basically Isaiah is having a vision of heaven, and he sees himself in the throne room facing God, and he said he's kind of taken aback. He's like, I'm an unclean man of an unclean people, and my words are unclean. And so the angel takes a live coal from the altar and touches his lips and says, now you are clean. And it's according to one of the sources I used, called The Prophecy of Isaiah by Alec Motier, if I said that correctly. This is where the idea is first introduced in Isaiah of a substitutionary sacrifice. The Isaiah was unclean, but rather than, it's as if the coal sort of took on his sin and took on his guilt, and it left him, and then he became clean. So we're going to see that theme developed quite extensively as we analyze the fourth song of the servant. So, anybody have any general thoughts about what we just read? Does it sound like a poem? Does it sound like a song? Does it sound like, no, this is just eyewitness detail and facts, man? Any thoughts? Anything jump out at you that sounds quite poetry-ish?
I've forgotten all of my official poetry terms.
Well, Hebrew poetry was a lot different than we know it.
Absolutely. The might not recognize a lot of it. The
I can't remember the order of how they worded that. I was not a really good Hebrew student.
We're going to dabble a little bit. A lot of enough to me, enough art and poetry make it through even in a translation. But you're right. There's a whole level of beauty here we're never going to get because we don't read classical Hebrew. And we don't read it well enough to understand poetry. I mean, it's one thing to know the definition of a word. It's another thing to know how to translate and understand a poem. Let's actually talk about that for just a second. Anybody here, raise your hand, if you speak more than just English. I just speak English. How would you guys describe what translating is when you switch from one language to another? Do you take every ounce of meaning with you, or do you lose something?
Depending on what you're talking about.
Well, let's say you're translating a poem.
We try to express the meaning as much as we can, but no way you can.
It's kind of like the New International Version of the Bible. It's a dynamic equivalent.
Mm-hmm.
So for instance, in the Bible, the Eskimos have no concept of lambs. When it talks about the lambs, in their translation of the Bible, it talks about seals, baby seals. So translating from one language to another, and I've taken some languages, but I don't speak any of them, would be kind of like that to me. You would be conveying the general idea or thought. You still don't get the full flavor of it unless you can read the original language, whether it's French, German.
Well said. What were you saying?
I was going to say some things are lost in culture as well. If you don't know the culture of your language, you might not be able to explain or translate that to the other culture, the other language.
Absolutely. I've heard it described basically, if you're translating a poem, essentially a good translator will write a poem in the language he's trying to take it to or translate to that's an approximate equivalent of the poem in the original language. But the word for word, you're not going to convey everything. Language is too complex to be reduced to a set of exact definitions. So, on one attempt, we're surely to fail, but I'm hoping we can at least glimpse some glimmer of the beauty contained in the original language. So
the only group that could really speak to that are the Wycliffe translators. You take a language that's only clicks, a language that's only dance, and how do you translate? That's
I would be clicking. I might be okay with, but if someone had to understand me by my dance, I would be misunderstood. I would be a misunderstood man. So go ahead. Did I hear someone about to say something? So they give you a brief background or the snippet of where we are in Isaiah. Lots of things have happened. Like I said, there's been sort of 3 servant songs prior to this. There was suffering that was introduced, and one author says began to cast its shadow in the second song. And then that suffering forms the heart of the third song. And now we get basically to sort of the details of that suffering. So a reader from who's gone through Isaiah previously it would be reasonable to expect that something called the mighty arm of God, we saw in Isaiah 50, the part of 52 we read, might expect that if the mighty arm of God was going to was going to redeem something, it would be like this, something in the form of a big, strong, buff military army war, something with power, because God has power. But a careful reader might have picked out that the previous servant songs, there are some hints that say that there are some hints at this servant of the Lord, this arm of God, would not fall into the mold of the traditional hero, and so this is going to introduce us to one of my favorite topics in literature. Though I can't say I'm super well versed in it, but the concept of the anti-hero. Anybody know what that is? You want to take a stab at a definition? I'll give you a hint. It's not hero.
My kids at school, we actually had this discussion because we're working lesson plan that we're starting, but we were talking about hero versus anti-hero, and I asked them for what they thought, and they said that a anti-hero is like Batman. Is what this is from 7th graders description, because he commits violence or kills for his justice or for his right, what he sees as right, where a true hero does not. And this is in a comic book. We're working on a comic book unit right now, and so that was how they described it. And I just thought that was kind of interesting from the eyes of a child.
Batman's a great analogy. The anybody Scooby-Doo fans?
Mm-hmm.
Shaggy.
Yes.
Classic anti-hero. There's a third who is my personal favorite. Anybody a fan of the Lord of the Rings trilogy?
Yes.
Who's the anti-hero there? Out of all the characters, all the troops, who's the anti-hero?
Is it Bilbo? The traveling companion to, I can't think of his name. The one that's carrying the ring, his traveling companion. Frodo.
Yes.
Thank you.
So Frodo and his band of 4 hobbits. Just in thinking about the books and the movie, I was amazed at what Tolkien did, because he gave them. They had these. There was nothing heroic about them except their virtues. They had an excess of virtue, of friendship, of trustworthiness, of honesty, of loyalty. But that's all they had. It's like the guy with the good personality, and that's it. They weren't strong, they weren't fast, they didn't have magic. Now in the story, somehow it is their virtue that carries them through. But I think maybe Frodo is the type of anti-hero I want you to hold in your mind. Shaggy's a bit bumbly, like he'd trip over something and then, oh, it's the treasure that was stolen. Look at that. I was stoned on my Scooby snacks or whatever. So not quite that. Batman can do a lot. I mean, he is a strong, competent guy. Not quite the category of anti-hero, but I think Frodo will do. So as we're reading this, look for a Frodo. So the looking at a piece of literature, any author is going to have a design. Nature has a design. But any author writing a play, writing a story, is not going to. It's rarely, only in modern times, is it a stream of conscious, emotional vomit written on a page with words. The most individuals writing are going to have a design. So let's look at a potential or suggested outline for Isaiah. So there's 3 basic parts. We've got we start off with an enigma in Isaiah 52. The middle portion that makes up the meat of the story is a revelation. We get all the details of the who, what, when, where, and why. And then we culminate with a solution, an exaltation of the sufferer, of the suffering servant. So let's take a peek in a little bit more detail at the first 3 verses. And let's read them again. Who would be so bold? Who other than Liz, because we already put put her to the task, would read the first 3 verses of Isaiah, starting Isaiah 52:13. Just start speaking aloud.
See, my servant will act wisely. He will be raised and lifted up and highly exalted. Just as there were many who were appalled at him, his appearance was so disfigured beyond that of any human being, and his form marred beyond human likeness. So he will sprinkle many nations, and kings will shut their mouths because of him. For what they were not told, they will see, and what they have not heard, they will understand.
This is a weird couple of verses. It suggests to me the like a bumpy hill, like you go up and then you come right down. You have this my servant will be act wisely. He will be the sort of 3 times exalted, raised, lifted up, and then highly exalted. And he will be disgusting, and nobody will want to look at him, and people will flee from them. Yet he will do something like bless lots of nations, and kings will shut their mouths because of how great he is. What are some things that jump out to you guys with these first 3 verses? Do you see some contrast there?
Overall, what I'm saying is talking about is crucifixion, what the outcome is. Talking about, obviously what it's talking about his appearance so disfigured beyond that of any human being who was emaciated before he was put on the cross. But through that, I don't know if that makes any sense.
Let's take one step back from who we think the identity of the servant is. Now, as Christians, I can't help but read this and feel like I'm reading a blow-by-blow account of my Savior. Go ahead, Keith.
In your preparation for this, did you read what interpretation Jewish scholars gave to that passage?
Overall, the one sort of non-Christian interpretation is that this is the Israel. This is just a great sort of redemptive poem. The 2 of the 3 interpretations I looked through. I want to focus on basically just the words, not necessarily what they do with your own personal, what your theology. Let's just look at the words. What do they convey? There's kind of this weird paradox already introduced. So somebody's praising a servant and yet claiming he's horrible and ugly. Yet he's going to be powerful and shut the mouths of kings. And it's right. It's like this up and down. We're going to see these first 13, 14, 15 of 52, they follow this pattern that we see sort of reversed and duplicated in the last part. So we've got the Lord speaking about his servant, and then we have some description and explanation of the servant's experiences. Well, at the very end, in the solution, as part of this design, you're going to sort of culminate the story with descriptions and explanations of the servant's experiences, and then you'll see the Lord speaking again about my servant. This literary device is called an inclusio. Inclusio. It sounds Italian, but I really have no basis for that. So second page that I hope you all picked up. There's just 2 literary devices that we're going to go through. One's called a palistrophe, and the other's called an inclusio. Let's go through inclusio and palistrophe just real quick so that we can hopefully recognize these when we come to it. So an inclusio, a literary device where the writer states a theme or an idea both at the beginning and the end of a story. It's intended to introduce and conclude a main point and let you know basically that everything in between should be read with this whole theme in mind. No matter how weird or outlandish or odd it may be, it's all part of this nice little envelope. All right, so a palistrophe is kind of like the up and down, but not like 2 or 3 verses of this up and down. It's basically a broader version. To me, it's sort of similar to an inclusio, but every line therein is important. So anybody want to read starting with Joshua 1, verse 5, basically the next to the red letter A. Chet, would you be so kind?
You want to read through?
Just read the A through A prime. Yes, sir.
Okay. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. Be strong and courageous. Be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the law, that you may be successful. Do not let this book of the law depart from your mouth. Meditate on it day and night. Be careful to do everything written in it. You may be prosperous and successful. Be strong and courageous. Do not be terrified. Do not be discouraged. The Lord your God will be with you wherever you go.
So you see that the idea and the repetition, from A to A prime, B to B prime, and what I'm calling prime is, I think, a math term, but it's basically B with a little. Am I saying that right, teachers?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. Do I get full marks for that? Yeah. Thank you very much. Okay. So this is, rather than trying to define in words a palistrophe, also called a chiasm, what you just read is that. It's like this nice opening and closing of a theme and an idea, and it's used throughout the Bible. But we're going to see a little bit of that in Isaiah, the Song of the Servant. So just a couple of footnotes about the verse 13. So, see, my servant will act wisely. Act wisely combines with both wisdom and effectiveness, and it basically means knowing exactly what is needed to get the job done. We have the threefold exaltation: raised, lifted up, highly exalted. The first thing that jumped in my mind was what we talked about last week about the brazen serpent being raised up, and then Christ would be raised up and lifted high, like the brazen serpent. You will probably be as a Christian reading this, I just feel like the whole time there's somebody tapping me on the shoulder, like, see this is in there, and it blows my mind that this was written, almost 800 years before the events of Christ's life. So this verse contrasts rather sharply with, just as there were many who were appalled by him, his appearance was so disfigured beyond that of any human being, and his form marred beyond any human likeness. So here we're first introduced to one of the themes of Isaiah, of the Song of the Servant, called the many. It's sort of this nebulous group of not benefactors, but beneficiaries, people who are going to get something good and something they need from the servant. They don't really deserve it, as you will find out, because they are the many who were appalled by him. Appalled is a really strong word that is used to describe a place that has been devastated, or a woman whose husband has died. I would imagine a bereaved wife. So it is not just the English word appalled kind of dilutes it just a bit, but I think you get the gravity of its Hebrew definition. So another literary device that we miss in the English is when they translate the first line of verse 14, just as there were many who were appalled at him. At him in the Hebrew is actually at you. It just doesn't make any sense in English. But switching to basically the second person is a very common literary device used by Hebrew poets. It basically, to me, it switches to God talking to the servant rather than the reader. I don't know if that makes sense now that I said it out loud. But it made sense when I wrote it. We're going to move on. The one commentary said basically from this he gets that the servant, whoever or whatever he is or she is, would experience the same humiliation and degradation that had marked the Israelites. Rather than appearing to be the strongest and most attractive representative of Yahweh, the servant would appear extremely weak and unattractive to people. So looking at verse 15, so he will sprinkle many nations. Have we encountered that odd word "sprinkle" before in these four walls?
Well, the sprinkling of the blood.
The sprinkling of the blood. Same word. Yeah. Sprinkling. So on the Day of Atonement, the high priest will enter the Holy of Holies and sprinkle the blood of the scapegoat on the mercy seat, on the cover of the ark, the cover, the separating the cherubim and God above from the tablets of the law below. The sprinkle in the Hebrew can be, there's disagreement on how to translate it. Some say sprinkle, some say startle.
Startle?
Yeah, I don't think they're quite related. It's kind of like bear and bear.
Oh,
Like I can, bear up under a heavy backpack, but a bear could also eat me. They don't have anything to do with each other other than they happen to be spelled the same. But it kind of works. So so let me read sort of some of the logic behind it because it's just fascinating. So interpretation of the Hebrew word yazeh, I know I pronounced that right, wrong, forgive me. Translated as sprinkle or startle. So there's two different lines of thinking. So if sprinkle's right, then Isaiah meant that even though the servant was an unlikely candidate as Yahweh's representative, he would still perform the priestly function of cleansing the world of its sins. If startle is correct, then the prophet meant that since the servant was such an unlikely candidate as Yahweh's representative, he would shock the world, meaning he made his claims, and then when he made his claims, God would exalt him. Both meanings are possible, both harmonize with the other about Revelation. A good poet would be cool with both of those.
Open to interpretation.
Open to interpretation, and both could be true.
Yeah, so it's still truth.
Yeah, it's still art and it's still truth. So why would the kings shut their mouths? What do you think might be meant by that phrase?
Go back to where it says my servant will act wisely, knowing exactly what is needed for the job. Maybe his wisdom silences the king. Is what I
absolutely. Why not? Yeah.
Or I'm thinking in the case of we'll go back to Pharaoh, who was acting as a god, and he was shut up literally. I mean, his mouth was closed. So all of those rulers that were false gods, functioning that way, that they will be shut down.
To me, it's absolutely not clear. But again, just like the definition of sprinkle or startle is not quite clear, I think a number of interpretations would work. The translation tends to mean basically silence from shock. They were so shocked they shut up.
Well, you said the definition of startle was something like unlikely.
So, I'll say that again. I'm sorry.
The definition you said for startle.
The definition for the word startle could mean basically that so instead of so he will sprinkle many nations, it would be so he will startle many nations, basically shocked or amazed them. So right, it kind of you're right. It plays right into that. So they were shocked and awed, shock and awe. That's right.
So the kings of the time, just like Daniel in the lion's den,
Yeah.
the king recognized when they were brought out that a God bigger than something he'd been serving. And so the next verses after he pulls them out attest to that. The king at the time said everybody will bow down and worship Daniel's God, because that's the real God. But it was the Jewish high priest that were just stuck in that rut, and they refused to believe anything. But several kings through that time became aware that he was a bigger God than the multiplicity of gods they were serving, or the one. That, to me, that speaks a little bit of that the kings did some,
right.
not all of them.
What
Some
did it for Nebuchadnezzar? When I think it was Nebuchadnezzar when Daniel was in the lion's den. Does that sound right? Okay. What did it take for him to be amazed?
For them to walk out of the
Right. It took essentially a miracle.
Yeah.
So, kings are not the guys that, oh, I'm sorry, you were talking. You finished. They kind of just start talking and you shut up. We've all had bosses like that, I'm sure. Let's jump into 53. So some expositors of the Bible have called this chapter that we're about to go into the Holy of Holies. It's approximately the middle chapter in part 2 of Isaiah. Most of the approximately 80 references to Isaiah in the New Testament come from this chapter. It is the most quoted or alluded to Old Testament chapter in the New Testament. That kind of means it's important.
So.
Kind of awesome that it's art. Speaking of the primacy and importance of art, I always confuse myself when I'm thinking about the Garden of Gethsemane or on the cross. On the cross, Christ said, "It is finished," and in the garden, he said, "Take this cup from me."
No, said, will you? No, he asked.
No, I'm sorry. My God, why have you forsaken me? He does that on the cross.
No, but in the garden, he asks,
"Take this cup from me."
If the Lord's
Yes.
willing, will he take the cup?
Yes. I digress. Anybody know what he's saying? What he's quoting? Psalm. Believe it is Psalm 22 or 23. In his darkest moment, he's quoting a song.
Oh yeah, 22:1.
That's pretty awesome. So here we get into part B of our little outline here. Let's move ahead. I'm going to put my buddy Justin on the spot here. Justin, would you read Isaiah chapter 53, verses 1 through 3 in a British accent? All right, fine. We'll accept it any way you choose to deliver it.
So Texas thing, that's about it.
Fair enough.
Who has believed our message, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? He grew up before him like a tender shoot, and like a root out of dry ground. He had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him, nothing in his appearance that should desire him. He was despised and rejected by mankind, a man of suffering and familiar with pain, like one from whom people hide their faces. He was despised, and we held him in low esteem.
Something tells me that the English translation does this just fine. This is just really, to me, really powerful. But it starts off a little weird. Who has believed our message, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? Let's just go straight to the commentary on that, because I didn't quite get that sort of rhetorical question. So the obvious answer to the question, who has believed our message? No one. But the second question the one author puts forward is that it actually tries to answer the first by saying, to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? The key word there is revealed. There is no understanding of who this guy is, who this servant could possibly be, without divine revelation. Pretty bold claim that mere observation, mere trusting in your senses, what you can see, taste, touch, feel, or smell. I think I got maybe more senses than we have in that sentence, but it doesn't matter. You get my point. Would not lead you to the correct conclusion. Well, let's go further and see if that's right. So he grew up before him. I think that is, he, the servant, grew up before him, God, like a tender shoot and like a root out of dry ground. Probably a nice southern way to translate tender shoot would be a sapsucker. Anybody know what that is? The thing you yank off your tree, so it'll even get better and more full foliage.
My little commentary says
it says sapsucker, doesn't it?
Sure. It says root of Jesse. It's a reference to the root of Jesse.
Could be. That works too.
Just a thought.
No, I think it works. The tender shoot and like a root out of dry ground, maybe because of this class, every time I see the word ground or dirt or earth, I think of Adam. I think of the garden. So what is this saying about the arm of the Lord, or the man that this servant is? He's cut from the same cloth you and I are. He's made from the same dirt we are. He had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him. We actually encountered this word beauty before in our first meeting here. Anybody remember what that reference was?
Oh, no, it was
Trees pleasing to the eye and good for food.
The description of the Garden of Eden.
It's also used to describe, I think it's Rachel or Rebecca, a pretty lady in Genesis. This is what happens when I'm teaching in class. You get approximations of truth. Rachel or Rebecca, one of those works for this. Sorry about that. And he had none of it. In the garden, Adam was just given scenery with beauty, just for the sake of the blessing. I think the blessing of the garden, the blessing that the garden was to Adam, and Christ was formed with none of that.
This verse always strikes me because when we look at all the pictures that all the great masters have made of Christ, they make him beautiful, and yet Isaiah said he wasn't beautiful. And
right.
We've heard other pastors say he was a common man. Yeah. I mean, he was just common. He wasn't pretty. He didn't have, I think they said Mary may have been fair of face, but they didn't necessarily talk about him.
Yeah, I think Christ was more of a David than a Saul.
And his father, was a carpenter. He was probably a big burly guy.
So the word beauty, like we said, Rachel, I have it in my notes. Sorry, Rebecca. The term majesty, basically it means gravitas, that outward impressiveness you would expect an important person to have. How in the world could a mere unimpressive guy be an arm of the Lord? So another way of looking at he grew up before him is basically saying, we watched this guy grow up. He used to throw rocks at my car. Wet his pants on that field trip. I mean, I know this guy. This is not the Savior. Could anything good come from Nazareth? So instead of appearing as a mighty oak or a flourishing fruit tree, the servant would grow up before the Lord as a sapsucker, like Frodo, a normal, unwanted shoot that sprouts up from the roots. The Hebrew word literally means suckling, but Isaiah used it figuratively here in the horticultural sense of the word. And what are most of these don't get the opportunity to grow. They're cut and thrown away. So he was despised and rejected by mankind, a man of suffering and familiar with pain, a man of suffering well acquainted with sorrow is another translation. Like one from whom people hide their faces. Think of a guy, that guy or girl you walk by on the street and you don't want to make eye contact. There's kind of two kinds of that. There's I think they're going to mug me because they don't look safe, or they're going to like ask me for money or something.
The homeless. It's hard to make eye contact with the homeless.
It is for me. That's what this servant was. The person you did not want to make eye contact with. That if you did, you would get real uncomfortable real fast and look away. So this book I used, I'm going to read a small paragraph from it because it's just fascinating at this point in the story. So our author Mortier, says, when all that the human eye saw and the human mind apprehended was added up, the result was 0. With this word, Isaiah completes a diagnosis of our human condition, which he has been unobtrusively pursuing throughout these 3 verses. To see the servant and find no beauty in him reveals the bankruptcy of the human emotion. To be one with those who despise and then reject him exposes the misguidedness of the human will. To appraise him and conclude that he is nothing condemns our minds as corrupted by and participants in our sinfulness. Thus, every aspect of human nature, according to Isaiah, and this person's interpretation of Isaiah, is inadequate. Every avenue along which by nature we might arrive at the truth and respond to God is closed. Nothing but divine revelation can make the servant known to us and draw us to him. Kind of fascinating that it makes rational sense. If everything about the servant leads me to believe he's a nobody, but in fact he's the arm of the Lord, what does it say about my powers of deduction? They're not adequate in this case. They have been corrupted by the fall. And we're only a few lines in. So we're now in the second part of the second part. This is basically smack dab in the middle of the story. Who have I not bothered? Yes. Marsha's looking at me.
I'm looking at the wall.
Close
I'm
enough.
trying to avoid your eyes. I'll read it.
Would you read, please, verses 4 through 6? Yes.
Surely he took upon our pain and bore our suffering, yet we consider him punished by God, stricken by him, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed. We all, like sheep, have gone astray. Each of us has turned to our own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all.
Thank you. What jumps out at you guys when we read these verses? These 3 right here, 4, 5, and 6. Torture.
The word iniquity comes up three times at least.
Pierced jumps out at me. The word stricken in verse 4, stricken by him and afflicted, tends to refer not to, it's used about 60 times in Leviticus. It doesn't mean leprosy, it means like the blow of leprosy. It's not quite the disease, it's like maybe the getting hit with the type of catastrophe that leprosy is. but it's not a temporary thing. It's not the kind of stricken you walk away from. The word pierced is interesting. We think it refers to Isaiah 51:9, where maybe not 51:9, but earlier in Isaiah, where there's a dragon, and the dragon is pierced to death, and the people are saying, "Awake, awake, arm of the Lord! Clothe yourself with strength." They're asking for this servant, the arm of the Lord, to be revealed. But what happens? The thing that pierces the dragon ends up piercing the servant too. Or maybe the way to pierce the dragon is through piercing the servant. So transgressions defined as the willfulness and rebelliousness of sin. Crushed is generally crushed, trampled to death, as when that is used. Iniquities tends to refer to the bentness or the pervertedness of human nature. The peace comes from the word, I say Salem because that's my grandmother's maiden name, but the probably is Salim, which means to be whole or complete. Isn't that just a beautiful way of defining peace?
I listened to these two Messianic Jewish guys. One's a rabbi, and I think they come on, 88.5, that station, Talk Christian Radio, like about 10:30. They come on with about a 5-minute deal. And it's ironic because they're talking about this very same section right now. They go through the Passover, a lot of the Jewish traditions, to try to explain it to Christians who don't understand it. And they said that in the Jewish faith, when they pull out the Talmud and read, or they read Old Testament sections, they'll read Isaiah 52, and they'll read 54, but they'll skip this section completely because it's just so obvious who they're talking about, who Isaiah is talking about. That the Jewish rabbis tend to skip this section altogether.
Wow.
You said peace. Say that again. It's to be whole.
So peace comes from the word Salem or Salim, which means to be whole or complete.
Complete. Thank you.
So let's take another look at verse 6. We all, like sheep, have gone astray. Each of us has turned to our own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. We all, ... us all. Does that sound like any of our definition words, class? Maybe a palistrophe? So there's also an internal rhyme in the Hebrew for the words gone astray and turned. We totally missed that. But what's interesting about the verses 4, 5, and 6 here, so verse 4 has 3 lines, verse 5 has 3 lines, at least in the Hebrew. Verse 4, 4 lines, verse 5, 4 lines, verse 6, only 3 lines. It's as if the emphasis of the entire stanza falls on this long third line on the statement, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. Kind of like this long run-on sentence that he had to carry. So, who's the sheep? The many, us. A simile used here reinforces the point just made. Sheep are notoriously short-sighted. They go after the next clump of grass without regard to where their feet may lead them. They're also self-centered. Have I not said that, Justin? You're as self-centered as a sheep.
Yeah.
Not a holy sheep, but a self-centered kind of sheep.
I always dreaded those Sunday school lessons on being sheep.
Absolutely.
They didn't sound very pretty. They weren't Rice graduates, that's for sure.
So I'll take my turn and read Isaiah 53, verses 7, 8, 9. He was oppressed and afflicted, Yet he did not open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter. And as a sheep before its shearers is silent, so he did not open his mouth. By oppression and judgment he was taken away. Yet who of his generation protested? For he was cut off from the land of the living. For the transgression of my people he was punished. He was assigned a grave with the wicked, and with the rich in his death, though he had done no violence, nor was any deceit in his mouth. Let's look at verse 7. What jumps out at you there?
Repetition. That he did not open his mouth.
Mm-hmm.
But yet he would, like, in any human way, though, he would have been provoked by being oppressed and afflicted. And so the fact that he's silent when that's happening is that much more of a weight.
Some of the commentary I read said this was an active silence. This was actively keeping your mouth closed instead of just having nothing to say. So there's 3 sections here, verse 7, 8, 9. There's kind of a progression. Here we see the verse 7 has 5 lines. Verse 8 has 4 lines. Verse 9 has 3 lines. It's almost like something's kind of winding down, tailing off. What does verse 9 make you guys think of? You guys being Christians. He was assigned a grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death. Sounds kind of like a riddle to me.
He died with thieves and went to live with his father in heaven.
Mm-hmm. No, more specifically, the events of his death.
Wicked associating with violence, and then right after the rich being associated with deceit. If you look at the way it's written.
Well, wasn't he given a tomb as well?
That no one else had laid in before by Joseph of Arimathea. Absolutely. So it's the kind of line like you kind of don't get until it's happened, and then it's like, oh, that's what Isaiah meant.
And I'm looking at it seems like a contrast, the grave with the wicked, okay, that's a negative thing, and with the rich and his death, and you would think, well, rich might be positive, but it's really not, because what the phrase about, it's difficult for a rich man to go to heaven than a camel to go through the eye of a needle. So it may be that the rich were considered, in this case, corrupt, also thieves, wicked, because of their power corrupting, absolutely.
It does kind of suggest that it's like saying he was assigned a grave with A, and then also with B, but really he didn't have any characteristics that would lead you to A, and no characteristics that would lead you to B. It's just kind of the way it's written. Yeah, the rich are wicked. Yeah, they have. Except they have lots of stuff.
Rich,
the tax collector. Absolutely. I think there's this is just me talking, but I think there's kind of a turning point. Like not thinking kind of thinking about the burial with the rich as a good thing, like Joseph of Arimathea taking him, preparing his body, and putting it in a tomb in which no one had laid in. It's kind of like a light peeking through the clouds, the clouds are about to blow away and the sun's coming out, because it's kind of the first not horribly negative thing that's been said for quite a while now into the poem. So now we're coming to the last part of our outline, the servant triumphant, exaltation through sin bearing. Anybody that hasn't read give us a good verses 10, 11, and 12 from Isaiah 53.
Yet it was the Lord's will to crush him and cause him to suffer. And though the Lord makes his life an offering for sin, he will seek his offspring and prolong his days. And the will of the Lord will prosper in his hand. After he has suffered, he will see the light of life and be satisfied. By his knowledge, my righteous servant will justify many, and he will bear their iniquities. Therefore, I will give him a portion among the great, and he will divide the spoils with the strong, because he poured out his life unto death, and was numbered with the transgressors, for he bore the sin of many, and made intercession for the transgressors.
So here we see the themes of success and exaltation that we saw in the last few verses of 52 coming out again. We see the theme of the many mentioned about 3 times just in the last 2 verses of 53. In 12, the word is translated great, but it's the same word translated many earlier on. We see suffering. The suffering in verses 53, chapter 53, verses 4 through 6, picked up again in the suffering of his soul in verse 11, first line in verse 11. We see another inclusio. It's marked off in the first 4 lines of verse 10. Can anybody see that? Pick that out. Yet it was the Lord's will to crush him and cause him to suffer, ... and the will of the Lord will prosper in his hand. So these verses, there's also kind of hidden another pattern to try and illuminate the meaning of the whole passage. So the first 4 lines of verse 10, the servant is doing the Lord's will. Then we get to the middle 5 lines of these last 3 verses. Servant's intrinsic worth is revealed. And then the final 4 lines of verse 12, the servant is meeting our needs. The word soul links these 3 sections in verses 10, 11, and 12. But it's also translated as life. What are some things that jump out at you from 10, 11, and 12?
There's that lovely word on 11, iniquities.
Mm-hmm. Kind of a theme, isn't it? So
and transgressions, you have on 12, you have transgressors twice, but if you go back to 5, he was pierced with our transgressions.
Mm-hmm.
Or sins, I guess would be a translation.
So one author says in verse 10, we stray as sheep, but we return as children. Something interesting also in verse 10, that phrase prolong his days, it's used 21 times in the Old Testament, but here is the only time it's ever used referring to one who is already dead. In verse 11 we see the word knowledge. By his knowledge my righteous servant will justify many. Knowledge links with act wisely in 52 verse 13. In the end of verse 12, because he poured out his life unto death. Anybody else think it's Paul talking about I'm being poured out like a drink offering? So what do y'all think? Can truth and art coexist? Not just truth, but prophetic truth. Just just kind of a whole nother level of truth. Wanted to leave y'all with a little bit of good art. Anyone seen this before?
Yes, and I stood in front of it. A friend and I went. She's an artist. She's with Jeanette Cliff George right here in Walmart for years. And we were just sobbing.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody thought we had just gone nuts. Because it was at the museum not long ago.
Mm-hmm.
We just walked up and we just stood in front of it just sobbing. It just hit us that way.
Mm-hmm. It's beautiful. It's so subtle. No Bible verses tacked on it. No lofty explanations. Just a lamb with a little halo.
And it's small. It's a small picture. It's not.
Oh, is it really? So we're finishing early tonight, which means we have enough time for some art. So we talked last time about Imago Dei and how idolatry was bad because we were kind of already the image of God, just in us, who we are. Some more than others. You know what I mean, Justin? Some of us are more image bearers than the others. So let's try to think for a minute back to the second meeting about the characteristics of the blessings of the artist. And how we might use those to sort of rate or critique work. So let's look at a little pencil drawing. Is there ability here? Intelligence, knowledge, craftsmanship, transcendence, generativeness? Do you feel inspired? I mean, this is just pencil. Take it in, think about how you feel. What do you think of this? Does this do something different? This is a 16-year-old, yeah. I've seen a rash of these on some blogs I follow. And then I came across this interesting device in a tool catalog that I subscribe to. It's called a camera Lucida. What if you know what it is? Tell us.
I'm pretty sure if it's the one that's where you're enlarging it. It's a little.
It's not for enlarging. It's
for a pencil, and you basically it's a form of tracing, basically.
Okay, different thing.
The camera Obscura?
No, the camera Obscura, I think, is basically a dark room with a hole in one wall that projects an image upside down on the wall away from the hole. So a camera Lucida is basically a couple of lenses that if you were looking through it, you could basically you'd see sort of a half of the image that transmitted through a lens, and then the other half would be, your blank sheet of paper. So you can it's a way of kind of being a human photocopier. So you can do real detailed stuff. There's a really awesome there's a really awesome documentary called Tim's Vermeer that is about this kind of the rich inventor guy named Tim, who decides he's going to try to figure out how the painter Vermeer did his amazingly exacting portraits. In the last year, I had the chance to actually go to Amsterdam, and we saw some Vermeers in person, and they are unbelievable. I mean, they're almost photographic. They probably were photographic. It's just, times a few hundred years, the pigments change. But it is amazing. Nobody. When you see him in a room of the other Dutch masters, it's like, yeah, they're really good until you see Vermeer, and then you're like, why did they get out of bed that day? But the interesting thing about Vermeer, he had no apprentices, he had no journals. Nobody knows how he did what he did. So it's been long suggested, because there's certain things in his paintings, such as the foreground might be a little blurry, but the subject is pristine and crisp. Why is the foreground blurry? That doesn't happen in a human eye. Everything's in focus, but through a lens it's not. Certain structures that should be straight are curved. And certain divisions, like shades that the human eye wouldn't recognize because our brain just blends them together through a lens, they really come out and are magnified. It's a fascinating documentary if you like art.
What's it called again?
Is it Tim's Vermeer? Produced by
the magician?
Yep, Penn Jillette.
Yeah.
Yep, produced by Penn and Teller. And you can't help but like Penn and Teller after that you see this.
Yeah, even though he's a Raven atheist.
Yeah, yeah. Look at the some of these hyper realistic the drawings, and I think, it's neat, but I kind of wonder if there's some mechanical device here.
Well, I can speak from experience. When I was in high school, we used to do art for the rodeo, and our art teacher taught us the grid method in order to enlarge from a photograph.
Right.
And granted, there's still, some skill involved in taking the grid from this size to this size and having it be photorealistic. But we had folks in high school who could do stuff like that, simply with the grid method. So
I spent too much time in science, not enough time in art class.
You can get a camera Lucida app on your iPhone.
Really?
Yeah, I'll just download it. I was listening to you.
I don't have an iPhone. I have an Android.
They have an
Awesome.
Android app too.
New toy. I'm going to tell my kids tomorrow.
What about when we go into color?
Oh, wow.
Dr. House, yes. Hugh Laurie.
Wonderful actor.
Absolutely.
I liked him better in
Steve's and
Does the addition of color do anything? See if you can try to quantify the difference between this and this. They're more similar than not. But one does something the other doesn't. At least to me. Hugh Laurie. Subtle shift of the palette. Maybe slightly less detail. But it just does something. What about this? Something called a thread painting.
Thread, like needle.
Needle and thread.
Who did that?
Casey Zavigalia. Yes. Yeah. Personally, on this website, they show the back.
Yeah. That answers that question.
That's just
I was
awesome.
wondering if they glued it down though instead of sewing it.
No,
Sometimes you can
right.
take string and
Fascinating.
glue it down.
I think if you go to the Bayou City Art Festival, I think there's an Asian guy out there that's doing that type of
With
art.
silk thread.
Yes,
I
with
think
silk
you're
threads,
absolutely
and
right.
It's just amazing to
I've
sit
only
there
seen him
watching
do
his
flowers.
stuff.
But it's like
so
a photo.
realistic.
Beautiful.
What's it called?
I thought it was called embroidery.
Oh, no. No.
Shut up, welder.
That was a good try.
And now
that friend of mine who's from Europe does those pieces where it takes miles of thread and they wrap like a cathedral inside, going from post, and they make these incredible where you have to think
Are
back,
they
come
site
forward.
artworks, basically?
What did you say?
Well, they call them site artworks, so they install them, or installation artworks. They install them, they show them for a period of time, and then they break them up and take them down, and that's it. They're never done again.
Well, this isn't a piece, they wrap pieces in the church or the cathedral. So nothing's brought in except that string.
Right, and they wrap it around the church.
Yes.
Right, so it's an installation artwork piece,
Right.
and then when they're done, they just break the
Hmm.
wrap.
Yeah, and there it
It's
goes.
done, that's it. You're supposed to just experience it, but you can't buy it and
There
take
you
it
go,
out.
that's what experience is.
Uh-huh.
Almost sounds like it's kin to the yarn ball.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, the yarn
Yeah.
ball.
So let me take you to one that I think you'll agree is my favorite, and I think you will come to that realization as well.
Back up just a little, John. Thank you.
I can't suck in my nose,
There
Peggy.
you go, thank you. I need you to do that. Christy, every time you get up, go around.
Is that the sculpture?
It's my rich Roman heritage.
Is that the sculpture?
It is.
Yes. Oh, is this doing it? Is it
That's
on
a
music?
sculpture?
Yeah.
Oh. Is this the guy in Houston? No.
I don't know where he was working, but it's amazing. Don't think he's using the camera Lucida.
What did he make it out
Go
of?
on,
I don't know.
Jeez.
We use the silicone.
That would be my guess.
There are so many plastic products these days
The
that you can use.
I mean, there's something amazing at looking at just that. This is actually my favorite photo of the whole set.
But the last picture just looks normal size. This one.
Well, the guy who did Sam Houston sculpture on the way to Huntsville, right outside of Huntsville, and then as you're coming into downtown from 45 North, you see the president heads on the side there, and he's done a lot of political persons throughout the country, and he's local. He's here in Houston. So he has a studio, and I think you can go and tour it from there.
Yeah, it's over close to summer.
Right.
They
And
did
then
the
the heights
restoration
north
on
somewhere.
Rushmore.
Exactly. Yeah, I think he did all of those. And he does the giant ones, but they also talk about perspective, because if you're looking at St. Houston from down here, his perspective modifies because of who's looking at it. If you were looking at it straight on, it would look weird. But if you're looking at it from down here up, then he has.
I only look at it like this.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all I've seen it. So they gave you what a video game programmer would call an Easter egg. I don't know, maybe. Just some of the New Testament references to what we went through in Isaiah, where they referred stolen and uncredited off the internet. You'll never catch me though. So just for I'm a bit of a nerd. If you're a nerd like me, there's your references. Anything else that anybody wants to share that jumped out at that rolling around your noggin from our look at Isaiah?
I have a I don't know. I'm even sure that.
You have an I don't know. Yes.
Yes.
We addressed those here.
When you on the back where you talked about this polystrophy and the inclusio, were those in the original Hebrew? The translators had to make that happen when they translated it to English?
Yes. So the translators had to be aware of it. Sometimes it was a little, I won't say easy, but easier, because in an inclusio, the word is often repeated. So no matter what you translate it to, as long as you translate it the same at the beginning as you do at the end, that'll carry through.
But now look at this little number with the A and A prime and B. That looks.
It's complex, yeah. But it's definitely about the ideas contained in the verses, and I think enough things are repeated that it will come through in a translation, but certainly not everything. Yeah. Keith, you were going to say something.
Well, we were talking about, remember I asked the question about the Jewish scholars' interpretation of Isaiah 53?
Yes.
A little while ago.
I gave you an inadequate answer, but
That's
yes.
okay. It was a good answer.
Thank you. Thank you, Keith.
It reminds me of an expression I learned when I worked here for Larry Lilly. He was always fond of using it, and it goes something like, and you've probably heard this before, it's in the Old Testament we have the New Testament concealed, in the New Testament we have the Old Testament revealed.
Well said.
Because it's easy for us to look at that and say, oh, they're talking about Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're a Jew of 4000 BC, 2000 BC, I can't remember when Isaiah, it wouldn't mean that.
Maybe you didn't know what it was going to be. Maybe it was going to be just poetry, just a psalm, not a messianic psalm.
Yeah. Besides, their idea of the Messiah was so way off what Jesus was.
Mm-hmm.
They were looking for somebody to free them from the Romans.
You know, that reminds you of the one thing I wanted to share. So the if a guy like, so there's a paradox in a lot of the Bible that's the kind of summarized in Christ, like, let the weak say I am strong. The stone that the builders rejected will become the cornerstone. Like basically the unlikely person, the runt of the litter, is the hero, is the strongest one. And I never understood that until it's a realization I had a few years ago that I just wanted to share. If in my own life, in my own personal testimony, it is in my weak areas that God is most revealed and comes most in power. I don't need Him in the places that I'm strong that much. I mean, I still do. I still have a need for God, but it's in the places that I fall short, the areas of growth that I need. That's where He is revealed. And so, how perfect is it for the God of reality to show His power through an unlikely weakling, a despised individual, a forsaken individual, somebody that has lost all of his friends. What kind of doubt would we have if Christ was this 7-foot tall guy who conquered the Romans single-handedly? Like, would we say God did that? No, the 7-foot tall guy did that. Goliath did. Right. So,
if you look at all the heroes in the New Testament, they were all photos. None of them were what you would expect to build this great kingdom for one man that, by all observations, was a failure in his quest.
Mm-hmm.
And he still uses people that are, well, look at Moses. Moses couldn't even talk. Well, he could talk, but not very well.
Mm-hmm. Stuttered, had a temper.
Yeah.
Chose a bad brother.
He might be able to use you and me yet.
That's what I'm hoping.
Something that we passed through earlier, and I just wanted to mention it. I remember hearing it preached at one time when we were going through a section of the Bible. And being a calligrapher, I've seen some old documents, and when they wrote, they didn't put periods a lot of times, depending on the whether it was Greek or Hebrew or Latin.
Right, but the English periods, they're inerrant.
Right, and it was later that punctuation was added, and these paragraphs of Isaiah 52 and 53 were added later. They were not original. It was a text that was written like a letter. And so when you were saying on Isaiah 53, number 1, verse 1, that it kind of seems a little out of place. But if you add it to the tail end of 15, and I should have said this earlier, it may flow better. For what they were not told they will see, and what they have not heard they will understand.
Who has believed our message? Yeah, that's a really good point.
It's more like those two should have been put together, and then 53 should have started.
All right, put away your keys. We're going through this again, folks.